Have you ever met someone who changed your entire life in a single moment? The question hung in the autumn air like wood smoke drifting between the old man and the boy who sat together on the porch. The mountains stretched before them, ridge after ridge, fading into blue distance, the same mountains that had witnessed everything, the same mountains that kept their secrets. Caleb Ashford was 75 years old that October afternoon in 1939. His hair had gone white as fresh snow, his face carved deep with the lines that come from 7 decades of living, of loving, of losing. But his hands, those massive scarred hands that rested on the arms of his rocking chair, still held strength. The kind of strength that comes not from youth, but from use from purpose, from a lifetime of doing what needed doing. Across from him sat Thomas, his grandson, 15 years old, and full of questions the way young men always are. The boy had his grandmother's coloring, red hair like autumn copper, green eyes bright as new grass. The sight of him made Caleb's chest tighten with memory and love and loss all tangled together. Thomas had been quiet for the past hour watching his grandfather whittle a piece of birch wood into something that might become a whistle or might become kindling, depending on how the grain behaved. Finally, the boy spoke. "Grandpa, how did you meet Grandma Ellie?" Caleb's hand stilled. The knife blade caught the slanting light. He looked up at his grandson, at those green eyes so much like Eleanor's, and felt the weight of 45 years pressing against his ribs. "You want to know that story?" "It is a long one, Thomas. A story about how sometimes doing the right thing is more dangerous than doing the wrong thing. And about how love comes to you when you are not even looking for it, when you have given up on the very idea of it." The boy leaned forward, elbows on his knees, attention focused. The way young people rarely focus anymore in this modern world of radios and moving pictures and distractions. "Tell me, Grandpa, please." Caleb set down his knife. He looked out at the mountains, at the forest going gold and crimson with October's touch. Somewhere up there, miles into the high country, the ruins of his old cabin still stood. Or maybe they had finally collapsed, returned to the earth like everything eventually must. He had not been back in years, had no need to. The cabin lived in his memory more real than timber and stone ever could. "All right then, but you have to understand something first. Your grandmother passed 2 years ago. You know that. You were there at the funeral, stood strong like a young man should. But what you do not know, what I have not told anyone in all these years, is the whole truth of how we came together. The town knows parts of it. Your mother knows some. But the full story that has lived only between Eleanor and me. Until now." He paused, gathering the threads of memory, pulling them tight. "It happened in 1894. I was 30 years old. Your grandmother was 27. And everything that came after, everything that made our life together possible, started on a September afternoon beside a mountain creek. What I saw there forced me back into the world I had abandoned, back into a society that had destroyed my family with nothing more than whispers and lies. And I had to choose between the safety of solitude and the dangerous path of doing what was right." Thomas sat perfectly still, hardly breathing the way children do when they sense a story of weight and consequence coming. "So let me take you back," Caleb said. "Back 45 years to when I was young and angry and alone. Back to the day everything changed." His eyes went distant, seeing not the porch or the mountains of 1939, but the same ridges 45 years younger, seeing himself as he had been seeing her, as she had been seeing it all unfold again, with the clarity that time sometimes grants to important memories. The late afternoon sun bled copper across the Appalachian ridges. He began, his voice settling into the rhythm of storytelling, that ancient cadence as old as humans gathered around fires. The air hung thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, that particular smell of mountains in September, when summer finally surrenders to autumn. In September of 1894, Caleb Ashford lived like a ghost in the high country of West Virginia. 3 years he had spent in that self-imposed exile, 3 years since his father's death, 3 years since his mother's mind, shattered like dropped china, and the sanitarium in Charleston became her final home. The cabin sat at the far end of Ridge Creek, a full mile above the last signs of civilization. He had built it himself that first winter, log by log mortise and tenon joints tight enough to keep out the wind. One room 20 feet by 16. Stone fireplace he had laid with river rock, hauling each stone up the mountain on his back. Shake roof of split cedar that would last 20 years if he kept it clean. It was not much, But it was his, and more importantly, it was far from the town that had killed his father with lies. The cabin's interior held the sparse possessions of a man who had chosen simplicity. A narrow bed covered with quilts his mother had stitched before her mind broke the patterns, still vibrant nine-patch and log cabin, and bear's paw designs worked in calico scraps. A rough table he had planed from oak, two chairs, one for sitting and one for setting things on, since visitors never came. Shelves lined one wall, sagging under the weight of his father's books. Whitman and Thoreau's Shakespeare and Homer volumes, his father had believed were as essential as flour and salt. A man without books is a man without windows, Daniel Ashford had said. Windows to other worlds, other minds, other ways of seeing. Above the door, mounted on wooden pegs, hung a Winchester Model 1873 rifle chambered in 44-40 caliber. 40 grains of powder behind a 200-grain bullet. Accurate to 300 yards in the right hands, and Caleb's hands were the right hands. 3 years of hunting had made them so. Below the rifle, hanging from a leather belt, was his father's Bowie knife. 10-inch blade of forged steel, sharp enough to shave with, because a dull blade was more dangerous than no blade at all. That September afternoon, Caleb was checking his trap line. He moved through the forest with the quiet efficiency that had become second nature, reading sign the way other men read newspapers. Fresh deer tracks here a day old. Raccoon scat there still soft. The forest spoke to those who knew its language, and 3 years of solitude had made Caleb fluent. He stood 6 feet 2 inches in his worn boots, lean muscle, and calloused hands shaped by endless labor. Chopping wood, hauling water, hunting game, tending the small garden that had to feed him through winter. His beard, thick and dark brown, streaked with premature silver, covered the lower half of his face. He wore it long because there was no one to care, no one to judge. His hair fell past his shoulders in waves, bound back with a strip of leather when he worked, but free now as he moved along the creek. The leather satchel at his hip already held 2 rabbits, not a bad haul for a Tuesday. The traps were simple snares of braided wire set with care at runs his observation had identified. His massive hands, scarred from axe work and rope burns, handled each trap mechanism with surprising gentleness. These hands had built his cabin, log by log. These hands had buried his father in the cemetery below town, ignoring the whispers of the gathered mourners. These hands had held his mother's trembling fingers the last time he visited the sanitarium, when she sat by the window and looked through him as if he were made of glass, as if he were not her son at all, but some stranger who had wandered into her fractured reality. Caleb pushed the memory away. Memories were dangerous. They made a man careless, and carelessness in the mountains could kill you as surely as a bullet. He moved down toward the creek where it bent around a stand of white birch. This was his last snare set for mink near the water's edge. The creek ran clear and cold, fed by springs higher up the mountain. In summer, the water dropped to a trickle, but September rains had swollen it to a respectable flow, deep enough in the center that a man could dunk his whole head if he had a mind to. That's when he heard it, a splash. Not the playful sound of a fish jumping or a bird bathing. This was the heavy, urgent splash of something large moving through water with purpose or panic. Caleb froze. His right hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt. In 3 years alone, he had learned that unexpected sounds meant one of 2 things: opportunity or danger. Either way, a man needed to be ready. Another splash followed by a gasp that was distinctly human and distinctly female. The sound carried a note of distress that bypassed thought and went straight to instinct. Someone was in trouble. Caleb's cabin sat a mile behind him. His nearest neighbor, old Samuel Porter, lived 3 miles down the mountain. The town of Blackwell Hollow lay another 5 miles beyond that. No one came up this far unless they were lost or running from something. He moved toward the sound, keeping low, using the birch trees as cover. The rational part of his mind told him to be cautious. 3 years ago, he had learned that towns were full of people who would lie to your face and smile while doing it, people who would destroy a good man to protect their own interests. But another part of him, the part shaped by his father's teachings about helping those in need, pulled him forward. He reached the birch line and peered through the white trunks. What he saw stopped him cold. In the creek, maybe 20 feet from shore, a young woman struggled in the current. But she was not drowning, not exactly. She was caught. Her heavy black dress, the unmistakable habit of a Catholic nun, had snagged on something beneath the water. The sodden fabric pulled her down like an anchor. She twisted and turned, trying to free herself, her movements growing more frantic with each passing second. The afternoon light slanted through the trees and caught on her face. Even from this distance, even half submerged and panicked, Caleb could see she was young, perhaps 27 or 28, though her eyes held a weariness that made her seem older. Her hair cropped short as per convent, rules gleamed copper red in the golden light. Her skin, pale as mountain laurel blossoms, had already taken on a bluish tinge from the cold water. She went under. Caleb did not think. Thinking was for men with time to waste. He dropped his satchel and plunged into the creek, boots and all. The cold hit him like a fist, stealing his breath. The current, stronger than it looked, immediately tried to sweep him downstream. He fought it, pushing toward where he had last seen her. She surfaced again, gasping, her eyes wide with terror. Those eyes, even in her panic, even through the water streaming down her face, Caleb saw their color. Green. Not the murky green of pine needles, but the clear, bright green of new grass and spring of hope against all odds. Her mouth opened to scream, but water rushed in instead. She choked, went under again. Caleb reached her in 3 powerful strokes. His hand found her arms, solid and real and desperately cold. He pulled her up. She came gasping, coughing, grabbing at him with the strength of drowning terror. Her fingernails dug into his shoulder through his shirt. He barely felt it. He dove under, found the problem immediately. Her habit had wrapped around a dead branch jutting from a submerged log. The heavy wool, designed to be modest and proper on land, had become a death trap in water. He pulled his knife from its sheath, the blade sharp enough to shave with, because his father had taught him that a dull knife was more dangerous than none at all. 2 quick cuts and the fabric parted. The current immediately tried to take the freed cloth downstream. Caleb grabbed a handful of the nun's remaining dress and kicked hard for shore. They surfaced together in the shallows. Caleb got his feet under him, lifted her bodily, and carried her the last few feet to solid ground. He set her down on a patch of sun-warmed moss near the birch trees. She collapsed forward onto her hands and knees, coughing up creek water, her whole body shaking violently from cold and shock and the aftermath of pure terror. Caleb stepped back, turned away. His heart hammered in his chest, partly from exertion, partly from something else he could not name and did not want to examine too closely. Because in pulling her from the water, in cutting her free, he had seen what no man should see without a woman's permission. The heavy habit, torn and clinging wet, revealed the simple white shift beneath. The soaked fabric hid nothing. Every curve, every line of her body showed clear as day in the slanting afternoon light. He stared hard at the trees, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Behind him he heard her breathing slow, heard the coughing subside into ragged gasps. When she spoke, her voice came out hoarse and strained, barely more than a whisper. "You saw me." 3 words. Simple. Devastating. Caleb kept his back turned, kept his eyes fixed on the white bark of the birch trees, on anything but the woman behind him. "I saw a woman in danger. That is all. You saw me without my habit. Without." She coughed again, a wet, painful sound. "You saw me." Caleb took off his heavy work coat, the one he had thrown on that morning against the mountain chill. He turned just enough to extend it behind him without looking, his arms stretched back in offering. "Take this. Cover yourself." A pause. Then small, cold fingers brushed his as she took the coat. He heard rustling, the sound of wet fabric being arranged of his coat's leather sleeves sliding over shaking arms. "You can turn around," he did, slowly, giving her time to object if she needed more privacy. She sat on the moss, wrapped in his coat, which hung huge on her small frame. She had gotten the habit's top piece off somehow, the coif that covered her hair revealing that copper-red hair plastered to her skull. Without the layers that made nuns look ageless in uniform, she looked achingly young. Water still dripped from her face. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge that worried him. "You are freezing," Caleb said. His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by the creek water and something else he could not name. "I need to get you warm." "I know." She hugged his coat tighter around herself. "But you need to understand something first." She looked up at him, those green eyes direct and fierce despite the shivers racking her body. "You saw me. By the laws of Mother Superior, by the rules of my convent, by the eyes of this community, I am now defiled simply because a man saw me in a state of undress." Caleb's brow furrowed. "That is ridiculous. I was saving your life." "I know." A bitter smile touched her blue lips. "But ridiculous or not, it is the truth we live with. And you know something about how truth matters less than what people believe, do you not, Caleb Ashford? He stiffened. She knew his name. She knew who he was, which meant she knew the story. Everyone in Blackwell Hollow knew the story, how Daniel Ashford had been accused of burning down Luther Blackwell's warehouse 3 years ago, how the whole town had turned against him, how he had taken his own shotgun into the barn one October morning and never came out, how Caleb's mother, Ruth, had broken like china dropped on stone, her mind shattering into pieces no doctor could put back together. How do you know me? His voice had gone flat, emotionless, the tone he used when he needed to feel nothing at all. I know the story. Everyone knows the story. She coughed again, harder this time. I am sorry about your father, about your mother, about all of it. Caleb did not respond. There was nothing to say. Sorry did not bring back the dead or restore the mad. She struggled to her feet, wavering like a sapling in wind. Caleb moved instinctively to steady her, but stopped himself. Touching her even to help might make things worse according to the rules she lived under. She saw his hesitation and laughed a sound with no humor in it. Too late for propriety now. You have already ruined me according to their rules. She took a shaky breath, steadying herself against the birch tree beside her. My name is Eleanor Fletcher, but everyone calls me Ellie. Fletcher, Caleb knew that name. Thomas Fletcher had died in the mine collapse 11 years ago, one of 7 men who never came home, which would make Ellie 16 when her father died. 27 now. Caleb had been 19 then, still working as a logger, still believing the world made sense. Thomas Fletcher's daughter, he said, not a question. You remember him? I remember. Everyone remembered. The collapse had been bad. 7 men buried under tons of rock and earth. The whole town had mourned. But mourning did not change anything. The mine opened back up 2 weeks later. Men still needed work. Families still needed food. Ellie nodded, then swayed dangerously. Caleb caught her elbow before he could stop himself. Her skin felt like ice through his coat sleeve. We need to get you warm, he said. Now before hypothermia sets in. Your cabin, she said through chattering teeth. Where is it? A mile up the ridge. Can you walk? I will walk, or I will die here. Either way, you have complicated both our lives, Caleb Ashford. But she took a step, then another, leaning on his arm, with a grip that surprised him with its strength. They made slow progress through the forest. Caleb matched his pace to hers, resisting the urge to simply carry her. He had already violated enough rules today. Best not to add more fuel to the fire that would surely come when her absence was discovered. Why were you alone? He asked as they climbed. The question had been nagging at him. Nuns did not wander the mountains alone. They traveled in pairs at minimum, and certainly not this far from town. Ellie's breath came in labored gasps, whether from cold or exertion he could not tell. I was collecting medicinal herbs with Sister Beatrice. She is older, has trouble with the climb. She twisted her ankle 2 miles back. I told her to wait while I went ahead for Solomon's seal. We need it for her joints. And you got lost. I got lost. She stumbled over a root. Caleb caught her, his big hands spanning her entire back through his coat. The paths all look the same up here. I found the creek, thought I could follow it down. Then I was thirsty and hot, and the water looked so clear. You took off your habit to cool down. The top part, yes. It was just going to be for a moment. I did not think anyone would. She stopped walking, turned to look at him. But you came. And now we are both in trouble. They reached his cabin as true dusk began to settle over the mountains. The cabin was not much to look at. A single room built from logs he had cut himself, chinked with mud and moss. The roof was cedar shake, the chimney riverstone. A small porch faced east to catch the morning sun. Behind the cabin, a lean-to sheltered his mare, a patient bay named Ruth after his mother. Caleb pushed open the door. The interior was dim, smelling of wood smoke and coffee and the sage he had hung to dry from the rafters. One room served as everything: bedroom, kitchen, living space. The narrow bed stood against one wall, covered with his mother's quilts. A table and 2 chairs occupied the center. The fireplace dominated the far wall, cold now, but laid ready with kindling and split oak. Ellie stood in the doorway, dripping creek water onto his threshold. She looked around with those sharp green eyes, taking in the sparse furnishings, the shelves lined with books, the rifle above the mantel, the orderly bachelor existence of a man who expected no visitors. It is not much, Caleb said, suddenly aware of the poverty of it, the loneliness built into every corner. It is warm, or it will be. She stepped inside, still wrapped in his coat. Build the fire. He did, grateful for something to do with his hands. The kindling caught quickly, fed by the larger splits. Within minutes, flames danced in the hearth, throwing golden light across the rough plank floor. Heat began to fill the small space. Caleb turned to find Ellie standing by the fire, his coat still wrapped around her, but her expression troubled. The firelight caught in her wet hair, turning it from copper to living flame. You need to change out of those wet clothes, he said. You will catch pneumonia otherwise. Into what? I did not bring a traveling wardrobe. The attempt at humor fell flat, weighed down by chattering teeth. Caleb went to the trunk at the foot of his bed, pulled out his spare shirt and a pair of wool pants with a drawstring waist. He set them on the chair. These will be too big, but they are dry. I will step outside while you change. Caleb. She said his name like a question and a statement at once. You understand what this means, do you not? If anyone finds out I spent the night here alone with you, it will not matter that you were being decent. It will not matter that you saved my life. They will assume the worst. Mother Superior will expel me from the convent. The town will call me a fallen woman. She met his eyes. And you? She paused. They already destroyed your family once with rumors. This will finish what they started. Caleb stood very still. The weight of her words settled over him like snow, cold and inexorable. She was right. He knew she was right. This town, these people, they ran on gossip, the way mills ran on water. Once a story started flowing, it gained momentum, power, inevitability. It did not matter what had really happened. What mattered was what people would say happened. And they would say, Caleb Ashford, the son of a suicide and a madwoman, had defiled a nun. Then do not tell them, he said finally. Change into dry clothes, sleep by the fire. Tomorrow morning I will take you back to the trail. You tell Sister Beatrice you got lost, spent a cold night in a cave, found your way back at dawn. Simple. Ellie shook her head slowly. You think Sister Beatrice will believe that? She will have sent searchers. And when they find out I was missing all night, they will want to know where I was, who I was with. She took a step closer to him. You are a good man, Caleb Ashford. I can see it in how you turned your back by the creek, in how you offered your coat without hesitation, in how you are trying to protect me now. But good men finish last in this world. Good men end up like your father. The fire crackled loud in the silence that followed. Outside, an owl called, hunting in the gathering dark. Caleb felt something rising in his chest, something he had kept locked down for 3 years. Anger. Not at her, but at the unfairness of it all. At a world where saving someone could destroy you both. What do you want me to do? The question came out harsh, almost rough. Let you freeze, send you back tonight in wet clothes to die of exposure. I am damned either way, so I might as well be damned for keeping you alive. To his surprise, Ellie smiled, a real smile this time, sad but genuine. There, that is the truth, is it not? Sometimes there is no good choice. Sometimes you just have to pick which kind of trouble you can live with. She picked up the dry clothes from the chair. Turn around, let me change. Then we will figure this out together. Caleb turned his back. He heard the rustle of wet fabric being peeled away, the quiet sounds of her dressing in his oversized clothes. He stared at the wall where he had hung his father's tools. Hammer saw square level, tools for building. His father had been a builder before the accusations, before the shame, before the shotgun. Daniel Ashford had built half the houses in Blackwell Hollow, had taught Caleb that honest work with your hands was the truest form of prayer, that a job done right required patience and care and attention to every detail, had taught him to help those in need no matter the cost. You can turn around now. She looked like a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes. His shirt hung to her knees. She had rolled the sleeves up 6 times and they still covered her hands. The pants cinched tight with the drawstring pulled around her feet. But she was dry and color was already returning to her cheeks. Thank you, she said simply. Caleb nodded, not trusting his voice. He hung her wet habit near the fire to dry, trying not to think about the intimacy of handling a woman's clothing, even clothing designed to hide everything. He put coffee on to boil in his battered tin pot, found the cornbread he had made yesterday, cut 2 thick slices, Added some dried venison from his stores. It was not much, but it was food, and food would help her body fight the cold. They ate in silence at first, the awkwardness of strangers forced into unwanted intimacy. But slowly, as the food warmed them both, as the fire crackled and the coffee steamed in their cups, something shifted. "Tell me about the books," Ellie said, gesturing to the shelves. "I did not expect to find so many in a mountain cabin." "They were my father's. I brought them up here when he did not need them anymore." He did not finish the sentence. Did not need to. He believed in education. Caleb continued. "Said a man without books was a man without windows." "What are you reading now, Whitman?" "Leaves of Grass." Ellie's eyebrows rose. "Poetry, that surprises me." "Why?" "Because I look like a brute." There was no heat in the question, just curiosity. "Because most men I know think poetry is foolishness." She sipped her coffee, made a face at its strength, drank anyway. "What do you like about Whitman?" Caleb considered the question as surprised she had asked it. "He writes about things as they are, not as people wish them to be. He sees beauty in ordinary moments, in grass, in the human body, in death as much as life. He does not lie to make things comfortable." "I exist as I am, that is enough," Ellie quoted softly. "If no other in the world be aware, I sit content." She met his eyes across the table. "That is from Song of Myself. We studied it briefly at the convent before Mother Superior decided it was too sensual for proper young women. You read Whitman, I read everything I could get my hands on before I entered St. Catherine's. My mother was from Ireland. She taught me to read from her father's books when I was small. After she remarried, books were my escape. The way she said remarried carried weight. Caleb recognized it. The weight of things left unsaid because saying them would hurt too much. Your mother's husband," he said carefully. "He was not kind, he was a drunk and a bully. When I turned 16, he tried to sell me to Harrison Blackwell in payment for debts." She said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "That is when I ran to the convent. Mother Superior took me in. I have been there ever since." Harrison Blackwell. The name landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. Harrison, son of Luther Blackwell, the man who had accused Caleb's father. Harrison, who now ran the mining operations and half the businesses in Blackwell Hollow. Harrison, who collected debts and grudges with equal fervor. "You know him," Ellie said, reading Caleb's expression. "Of course you do. Everyone knows the Blackwells." "I know him." Caleb's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "His father destroyed mine. I imagine the son learned well from the father." "He did." Ellie's voice had gone quiet, almost distant. "Harrison still claims he has rights to me. Says my stepfather owed his family $800. Says I am payment on that debt." She looked up, and in her eyes Caleb saw an echo of his own trapped desperation. "That is why I have to take final vows. Once I am fully professed, once I belong to God in the eyes of the law, Harrison cannot touch me. I will be safe." "Is that what you want, to be a nun?" The question hung in the air between them. Outside, full darkness had fallen. The cabin windows showed nothing but blackness and their own reflections in the glass. "I want to be safe," Ellie said finally. "Whether that is the same as wanting to be a nun, I honestly do not know anymore." They fell silent again, but it was a different silence now. The silence of two people who had recognized something in each other. Some shared understanding of what it meant to be trapped, to be hunted, to be forced into corners by circumstances beyond control. Caleb stood, moved to the door. "You should sleep. Take the bed. I will be on the porch." "Caleb, it is October. You will freeze out there. I have slept in worse." He grabbed a quilt from the chest. "Lock the door after me. Do not open it unless you hear my voice." "Why are you doing this?" The question stopped him at the threshold. "You could have left me in that creek. You could refuse to help me now. Instead, you are giving up your bed, your warmth, your safety." Why Caleb turned back to look at her, small and vulnerable in his oversized clothes, standing in his cabin, with firelight painting shadows on her face. Why was he helping her? Because his father had taught him to help those in need. Because she reminded him of himself trapped by other people's choices. Because those green eyes held a spark of defiance that said she was more than the circumstances that tried to define her. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said. "And because I am tired of running from doing right just because it might be dangerous." He stepped out into the cold night before she could respond. The door closed behind him. He heard the bolt slide home. "Good," She was safe for tonight, at least. Caleb settled into his rocking chair on the porch, wrapped the quilt around his shoulders, and stared out at the darkness. Somewhere down the mountain, Sister Beatrice would be raising alarms. Somewhere in Blackwell Hollow, Harrison Blackwell would hear about a missing nun. Somewhere in the sanitarium in Charleston, his mother sat by a window, her mind lost in corridors no one could map. And here he sat, having thrown himself directly into the path of the very destruction he had been hiding from for 3 years. All because a woman with copper hair and green eyes had gotten tangled in a creek. The smart thing would be to take her back at dawn, drop her at the tree line, where she would be found and disappear back into his mountains before questions could be asked. The smart thing would be to protect himself first. But Caleb had learned something in these 3 years alone. The smart thing and the right thing were rarely the same, and he had already watched one good man destroy himself trying to do right in a wrong world. Maybe it was time to find out if doing right could actually win for once. The night deepened, stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. An owl called from the pines hunting, life continuing indifferent to human troubles. Inside the cabin through the single window, Caleb could see Ellie moving about, settling in for sleep. The firelight caught on her hair, turning it to living flame. She looked small and alone in there. Then again, he had been small and alone for 3 years now. Maybe that was what they both needed to stop being. Dawn would come soon enough, bringing with it all the complications he had invited by choosing mercy over caution. But for tonight, in this moment, a woman was safe and warm who might otherwise be dead. And that Caleb decided was enough. He pulled the quilt tighter and let the mountain darkness wrap around him like an old friend. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight, he had done right. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change everything. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, casting the porch in soft orange light. Thomas shifted in his chair, his young face intent with the kind of focus that told Caleb the boy was not just listening, but truly hearing. Grandpa Thomas said quietly, "So you lied. You made up a fake story about meeting her." Before Caleb looked at his grandson for a long moment. The boy deserved truth, even uncomfortable truth. "I lied, Thomas, and I am not sorry for it. Sometimes a lie that saves a life is more honest than a truth that kills. You have to learn the difference. Lying to protect the weak, that is courage. Lying to protect yourself, that is cowardice." He paused, letting the words settle. "Your grandmother and I, we built our marriage on a foundation of that lie. But what grew from it was more true than any courtship that followed proper rules. Because we chose each other. Not because society approved or families arranged it. We chose each other despite every obstacle they put in our way." "What happened next?" Thomas asked. "What happened next," Caleb said, his eyes going distant again, "was that we had to make that lie convincing. And that meant going back down the mountain and facing the very people I had spent 3 years hiding from." Dawn came to the mountains the way it always did, slowly at first, then all at once. The eastern sky bled from black to indigo, to rose, painting the ridgelines in shades of copper and gold. Caleb had been awake for hours, watching the transformation, his body stiff from a night in the rocking chair, but his mind alert. The cabin door opened. Ellie stood framed in the doorway, still wearing his oversized clothes, her copper hair catching the first rays of sun. She had folded her habit into a neat bundle under her arm. The black fabric had dried overnight by the fire, though it would never be the same. The tears his knife had made showed clearly in the morning light. "You did not sleep," she said. Not a question. Slept enough. Caleb stood his joints, protesting. At 30, he was too young to feel this old, but mountain living aged a man in ways that city life never could. "Coffee is ready inside." I kept the fire going. They moved inside together, an awkward dance of two people learning the boundaries of unexpected intimacy. Caleb poured coffee while Ellie stood by the window looking down the mountain toward the valley where Blackwell Hollow sat nestled in morning mist. "They will be searching for me by now," she said. "Sister Beatrice will have told Mother Superior I never returned. They will have men combing the mountains. Then we should get you back before they come this far." Caleb handed her a cup. Their fingers brushed. Both pulled away too quickly, aware of the danger in even that small touch. Ellie turned from the window to face him. In the morning light, he could see the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw. This was a woman who had made a decision during the long night. "Caleb, we need a story. They will ask questions. We need the same answers." He nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing through the cold hours of darkness. We met 2 years ago, he said, at the cemetery. Understanding flashed in her green eyes. She was quick, his Ellie. She saw where he was going immediately. I was putting flowers on my father's grave, she continued. You were visiting your mother at the sanitarium in Charleston and stopped at the cemetery first. We talked about loss, Caleb said. About fathers who died too soon. About the weight of grief that never quite lifts. We met again a few times, always by chance at first, always brief, until it was not chance anymore, Caleb finished. Until I realized I was looking for you, Ellie's hands tightened around her cup. But I was already committed to the convent, and you were already living on the mountain hiding from the world. So we stayed apart for both our sakes, until yesterday when I got lost and ended up at your creek. She met his eyes. Is this story good enough to save us? It has to be, Caleb said, because I cannot think of anything better, and we are rapidly running out of time. They saddled his mare Ruth together. The horse was patient, used to Caleb's quiet ways, unbothered by the addition of a second rider. Ellie climbed up behind him, her arms circling his waist for balance. The contact was unavoidable, necessary, and utterly improper. But propriety had already been shattered yesterday in the creek. Now they were just trying to survive the aftermath. As they descended the mountain trail, Ellie spoke quietly, her voice meant only for him, her breath warm against his shoulder blade, through his shirt. They will ask why I was so far up the mountain, why I went on alone when Sister Beatrice told me to wait. Tell them you were collecting Solomon's seal, that you thought you could find it quickly and get back, that you got turned around in the forest because all the paths looked the same, that you found the creek and thought you could follow it down to familiar ground. And when I slipped into the water, you were hot. You removed your coif to cool down, just for a moment. You did not expect the current to be so strong. Ellie was quiet for a moment, then added, and you happened to be checking your trap line nearby. You heard me struggling. You pulled me out without hesitation because that is the kind of man you are. Her arms tightened slightly around his waist. A man who does the right thing even when it costs him everything. Caleb said nothing. What could he say? She had summarized his entire life in one sentence. The ride down took an hour. They passed through groves of oak going gold with autumn, through clearings where morning mist still clung to the ground like scattered cotton. The mare picked her way carefully over rocks and roots, sure-footed from years of mountain trails. As they descended into the populated zones, Caleb felt the old tension returning to his shoulders. For 3 years he had avoided other people, avoided their stares and whispers. Now he was riding directly into the heart of their judgment, and this time he carried someone else's future with him. The first sign of the search party came half a mile from town. 4 riders emerged from a side trail moving methodically through the forest. Caleb recognized them all. Robert Carter, the miner, heavy-set and weathered, maybe 55 years old. His face showed the coal dust that no amount of scrubbing could remove from a man's creases. He had been one of the men who worked with Thomas Fletcher. Jacob Moore, the shopkeeper, younger at 40, with the soft hands of a man who handled goods rather than tools. His general store sold everything from flour to horseshoes, and he kept careful account books that recorded every transaction. Marshal William Grant, 52 and tough as boot leather, a man who had kept the peace in Blackwell Hollow for 20 years through a combination of fairness and fearlessness. His hand rested on the revolver at his hip, but his eyes were more curious than hostile. And Sister Beatrice, riding side saddle on a gentle mare, her face creased with worry beneath her coif. She was perhaps 60, with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering and still chose kindness anyway. The party pulled up short when they saw Caleb and Ellie approaching. Sister Magdalene, Sister Beatrice called out, relief flooding her voice. Thank the Lord. We have been searching all night. Ellie straightened behind Caleb, and he felt her gather herself, felt her slip into the role they had constructed together. Sister Beatrice, I am so sorry. I got lost in the forest. The paths all looked the same. I found the creek and tried to follow it down, but then I slipped and the current caught me. I would have drowned if Mr. Ashford had not pulled me out. Sister Beatrice's eyes went to Caleb, then to Ellie's torn habit, then back to Caleb's face. He watched her do the calculation, saw the moment she understood what this meant. You spent the night, the nun said quietly. Together, he kept me from freezing to death. Ellie said, her voice firm. He gave me his coat, his dry clothes, his bed. He slept outside in the cold. He conducted himself with complete honor, sister. More honor than most men I have known. Robert Carter shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. Jacob Moore's face remained carefully neutral, but Marshall Grant's expression had sharpened with interest. This was not the simple rescue he had expected to find. "We should get you back to St. Catherine's," Sister Beatrice said. "Mother Superior will want to speak with you immediately." "I know," Ellie said. She reached forward and took the bundled habit from where Caleb had secured it to his saddle. "Can you bring this? I will need to change before we reach town." It was a small gesture, giving him the habit to carry, but it spoke volumes. It said they were together in this. It said she trusted him, and that trust, Caleb realized, meant more than he could put into words. The group fell into formation around them, not exactly guards, but not quite companions either. They rode in tense silence, everyone processing what they had found, what it meant, what stories would spread through Blackwell Hollow by nightfall. St. Catherine's Convent sat at the base of the mountain, a gray stone building that looked more like a fortress than a house of worship. High walls surrounded a central courtyard. Narrow windows stared out like judgmental eyes. The whole structure radiated an air of severity, of rules enforced and pleasures denied. Mother Superior Constance Whitmore waited in the courtyard, flanked by two younger nuns. She was a tall, gaunt woman in her early 60s, with a face like carved granite and eyes that seemed to see straight through lies to the sin beneath. When the riders entered the courtyard, her gaze fixed immediately on Ellie. "Sister Magdalene," she said. The voice was cold as January frost. "So you have returned?" "Yes, Mother Superior." Ellie slid down from Caleb's horse. She stood straight, shoulders back, chin up. No cowering, no apologies yet. Mother Superior's eyes shifted to Caleb. "And you brought a man with you. How convenient." Caleb dismounted, handed the reins to Robert Carter. He met the older woman's gaze directly. "I am Caleb Ashford, Mother Superior. I found Sister Magdalene yesterday when she was in danger. I kept her safe through the night. Now I have brought her back to you as was right." "How noble." The sarcasm dripped like poison. "And I suppose you expect gratitude for keeping one of my novices in your isolated cabin for an entire night, for clothing her in men's garments, for whatever else may have occurred." "Nothing occurred," Ellie said sharply. Caleb Ashford behaved with complete propriety. Did he? Mother Superior descended the 3 steps from the main building, moving toward them with the inevitability of judgment itself. "Tell me, Sister Magdalene, what were you doing so far up the mountain?" "Sister Beatrice says she told you to wait, that she specifically instructed you not to go on alone. I was collecting Solomon's seal. We needed it for Sister Beatrice's joints. You were disobeying orders, as you have a habit of doing." Mother Superior circled them slowly, a predator assessing prey. 3 years you have been with us, Magdalene. 3 years of instruction, of prayer, of preparation for your final vows. And in all that time, I have never been convinced you truly had a calling. You came to us running from something. And now it seems what you were running from has caught up with you. Caleb felt anger rising in his chest. The way this woman spoke to Ellie, the contempt in her voice, the assumption of guilt. It was the same tone the town had used with his father, that casual cruelty of the powerful toward the vulnerable. "She was not running from me," Caleb said, his voice cutting through the courtyard. "She was running to safety. From Harrison Blackwell." The courtyard went silent. Even the nuns seemed to stop breathing. Mother Superior's eyes narrowed to slits. "What did you say, Harrison Blackwell?" Caleb repeated, taking a step forward. "He claims he has a contract that Ellie's stepfather sold her to him to cover debts. She came here to escape that, to find protection in vows. Are you telling me you know nothing of this?" Mother Superior's face had gone carefully blank. "Too blank. I know nothing of any contract." "Do you not?" Caleb pressed. "Because I am betting Harrison Blackwell has been very generous to St. Catherine's over the years. Very interested in keeping close ties with the convent where his property resides." It was a guess, but an educated one. The Blackwells bought everything, controlled everything. Why would a convent be any different? The flash of anger in Mother Superior's eyes told him he had struck home. "How dare you come here and make accusations? You, the son of a thief and a suicide. You who live like an animal in the woods. You have the audacity to judge this institution. I have the audacity to protect an innocent woman from being used as a pawn." Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Which is more than you are doing." Before Mother Superior could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "That is quite enough. A man emerged from the convent's chapel, a priest in his late 50s with iron gray hair and kind eyes. He wore the simple black cassock of a parish priest, not the ornate vestments of a bishop, but he carried himself with natural authority. Father Brennan, Mother Superior, said, her tone suddenly respectful. I did not realize you were on the grounds. I came to hear confessions, Father Brennan said mildly, but it seems I have arrived in the midst of a different kind of truth-telling. His gaze swept across the scene, missing nothing. Caleb, Ellie, Mother Superior's rigid posture, the watching nuns and townsmen. Perhaps we should move this discussion somewhere more private. It was not really a suggestion. Within minutes, they were in Mother Superior's office, a Spartan room dominated by a large wooden desk and a crucifix that seemed to stare down in perpetual disappointment. Ellie and Caleb sat in chairs before the desk. Mother Superior stood behind it, her back rigid. Father Brennan positioned himself by the window, neutral ground. Now Father Brennan said gently, suppose someone tells me what actually happened. Starting with you, my child, he looked at Ellie. Ellie took a breath. Then she told the story they had constructed, how she had met Caleb 2 years ago at the cemetery, how they had talked, met again, formed a connection, how she had already been committed to the convent path by then, and he to his mountain solitude, how they had stayed apart, tried to do the right thing, how yesterday's accident had brought them back together. She told it well, with just enough detail to be convincing, just enough emotion to be believable. Caleb watched Mother Superior's face as Ellie spoke. The older woman's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, calculation. When Ellie finished, Father Brennan turned to Caleb. And you, son, is this your understanding of events as well? Yes, Father, Caleb met the priest's eyes. Something passed between them, an unspoken communication. The priest knew they were lying, but he was choosing to accept the lie anyway. Why, I see, Father Brennan said, folding his hands. Then it seems we have a situation that requires careful consideration. Sister Magdalene, you have not taken your final vows yet. Is that correct? Correct, Father. I am still a novice, which means you can leave the convent at any time without canonical penalty. He looked at Mother Superior. Is that not right? Mother Superior's lips pressed into a thin line. Technically, yes, but it is highly irregular. Many things in life are irregular, Father Brennan said. It seems to me that if Sister Magdalene has a prior attachment, if her heart was never fully committed to religious life, then it would be wrong to force final vows. Would you agree, Father, with respect, we do not know that this attachment is real. We only have their word. Are you calling them liars? Father Brennan's voice remained gentle but steel underneath. Mother Superior hesitated. In that hesitation, Caleb saw the truth. She knew about Harrison Blackwell's interest in Ellie. She might even know about the contract, the money. And Father Brennan had just given her a way out, a way to wash her hands of the whole complicated mess. I am saying this requires investigation, prayer, discernment. Of course, Father Brennan smiled, which is why I propose this. Sister Magdalene will remain here at the convent under your care for a period of reflection. Let us say 1 week. During that time, she will pray about her path, consider whether her calling is truly to religious life or to marriage. At the end of the week, she will make her decision. If she chooses to leave, she will do so with the church's blessing and no stain on her character. If she chooses to stay and take final vows, we will consider this incident a test of faith that she passed. He looked at Caleb. Does that seem fair to you, Mr. Ashford? It was more than fair. It was a gift. Father Brennan was offering them time, a framework for Ellie to leave the convent without scandal, a way forward that did not destroy either of them. Very fair, Father. Thank you, Ellie, Father Brennan asked. Yes, Father, thank you. Mother Superior looked like she had swallowed vinegar, but she nodded. 1 week. But during that time, Sister Magdalene will be confined to the convent grounds. No visitors, no contact with the outside world. Except for confession, Father Brennan said smoothly. She should have access to the sacraments during this time of discernment. Another small victory. Confession meant privacy, meant she could talk to Father Brennan away from Mother Superior's watchful eyes. The meeting ended. Caleb was escorted out by Sister Beatrice, who walked him through the courtyard with the kind of gentle concern that reminded him his mother had once been like this, thoughtful and caring, before grief broke her mind. I will watch over her, Sister Beatrice whispered as they walked. She is a good girl no matter what Mother Superior thinks. She deserves happiness. Thank you, Sister. At the convent gates, old Samuel Porter was waiting, sitting on his horse, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up when Caleb emerged, his weathered face creased with concern. Heard there was excitement at St. Catherine's, Sam said. Figured you might need a friend. How did you hear already, son? This is Blackwell Hollow. A sparrow cannot fart without the whole town knowing by noon. Sam tucked his knife away. So you and a nun. That is a new one even for you. Despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. It is complicated. Love usually is. Sam urged his horse into a walk. Caleb mounted his mare and fell in beside him. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? I mean, you just told the whole town you have been secretly in love with a nun for 2 years. She has got a week to decide her future. What is your plan? Caleb had not thought that far ahead. He had been so focused on surviving the immediate crisis that he had not considered what came next. I do not have a plan, he admitted. Then you better come up with one, Sam said. Because Harrison Blackwell will not sit idle. He will have heard by now that his prize is slipping away. And that boy does not take losing well. Just like his father. 2 days passed. Caleb stayed at Sam's small house on the edge of town, helping with chores, restless as a caged animal. He had spent 3 years alone on the mountain, comfortable in solitude. Now the walls of Sam's cabin felt like a prison. On the evening of the second day, Sam poured them each a whiskey, sat down across from Caleb at the worn kitchen table, and spoke words that changed everything. Your father did not set that fire, Caleb. Everyone who worked there knew the warehouse was old. Wiring was shot. Luther Blackwell was too cheap to fix it. Fire was bound to happen eventually. The words hung in the air like smoke from a pistol. Caleb sat very still, his whiskey untouched. Why did no one speak up? Because Luther Blackwell signs the paychecks, son. He owns the mine, the company store, half the houses in town. Men with families cannot afford to be heroes. Sam's voice was heavy with old guilt. I am not proud of it, but that is the truth. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Sam spoke again, and this time his words carried even more weight. There is something else you should know about Ellie's father, Thomas Fletcher. Caleb looked up. The mine collapse that killed him. It was not an accident. The room seemed to tilt. Caleb gripped the edge of the table. What Thomas had been documenting, safety violations, keeping records. He was going to go to the state inspectors, blow the whistle on the whole operation. 2 weeks before he was set to testify, that tunnel collapsed. 7 men died, including everyone who had been helping Thomas gather evidence. Sam's jaw tightened. You are saying Blackwell killed them deliberately. I am saying it is mighty convenient when your accusers all get buried under a few tons of rock. Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. His father destroyed by lies. Ellie's father destroyed by murder. The Blackwells had been poisoning this town for decades, and everyone had been too afraid to stop them. Does Ellie know about her father? I do not know. She was 16 when it happened. Thomas might have kept it from her, tried to protect her. Sam looked at Caleb with those faded blue eyes that had seen too much. But now she is involved with you, and you are the son of another man the Blackwells destroyed. That makes you both targets. Caleb stood abruptly, paced to the window. Outside, Blackwell Hollow spread before him in the gathering dusk. From here it looked peaceful, but he knew better now. Beneath the peaceful surface ran currents of power and fear of debts owed and silence bought. You need allies, son, Sam said. People willing to stand against the Blackwells. Who in this town would do that? They are all on Blackwell payroll. Not all. Sam's voice carried a note of determination. There are others who remember Thomas Fletcher. Others who lost family in that collapse. Others who are just damn tired of being afraid. Give me 2 days. Let me talk to some people. See who is willing to stand up. Sam, I cannot ask you to risk yourself for this. You are not asking. I am offering. The old man's face was set stubborn. Besides, I owed your father. Never got the chance to make it right before he died. Maybe this is how I pay that debt, by helping his son. Caleb paused in his telling, took a sip of water. The evening had grown cool. Thomas had wrapped a blanket around his shoulders but showed no signs of wanting to go inside. Grandpa, the boy said. Mr. Porter, was he the same Sam who came to Grandma's funeral? Caleb nodded. The same. He lived to 93 years old, that tough old bastard. Died in his sleep in 1917 after seeing this town finally free itself from Blackwell control. He was at our wedding. Stood up as my witness? One of the best men I ever knew. The boy was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What happened next?" "What happened next," Caleb said, was that Sam kept his promise. 2 days later, 6 men came to my cabin in the dark of night, men who had decided that fear had ruled them long enough. The third night found Caleb back at his cabin. 6 men rode up the mountain trail together, arriving just after sunset. Caleb had a fire going, coffee brewing, venison stew simmering in his cast iron pot. It was not much, but mountain courtesy demanded he offer what he could. Samuel Porter came first, his 70 years showing in how he dismounted, but his eyes were sharp and clear. Dr. Henry Wade followed, 61 years old with liver-spotted hands and the weary expression of a man who had seen too much suffering and been forced into too much silence. Robert Carter the miner, heavy and strong coal dust, permanently embedded in the creases of his weathered face. Jacob Moore, the shopkeeper, younger but cautious, his account book's brain always calculating costs and benefits. Father Brennan, still in his black cassock, looking oddly natural on horseback. And bringing up the rear, Marshal William Grant himself, which surprised Caleb most of all. They gathered on Caleb's small porch, 6 men crowded into a space meant for one. Each had come for their own reasons, but they had all come. That mattered. Dr. Wade spoke first. He pulled out a worn leather folder, opened it to reveal yellowed papers covered in neat handwriting. "Thomas Fletcher's death," the doctor said quietly, "and the 6 other men who died in that collapse. I kept the real reports. The ones that show the injuries did not match the official story." He laid the papers on the makeshift table Caleb had set up. Thomas Fletcher had a skull fracture that occurred before the collapse. Someone hit him on the back of the head with something heavy, probably a rock or a mining hammer. The collapse did not kill him. He was already dead when the tunnel came down. Dr. Wade's voice shook slightly. "I wrote it up honestly in my initial report. Luther Blackwell made me rewrite it. Said if I did not, I would lose my license, my practice. Said my family would suffer. So I changed it. But I kept the originals. Thought maybe someday they would matter." He looked at Caleb. "Maybe today is that day." Robert Carter spoke next. "I was there that day in the mine. I was in a different tunnel when it happened, but I heard things. There were explosions right before the collapse. Not one big blast like a cave-in, multiple smaller blasts, deliberate charges." He pulled a piece of paper from his coat pocket, unfolded it. "Someone said explosives. And the only ones with access to blasting powder were the foremen, all of whom worked directly for Luther Blackwell. I have written down what I heard, what I saw. It is not much, but it is the truth." Jacob Moore added his piece. "I have the account books. Luther Blackwell bought enough dynamite that month to blast through half the mountain. 150 sticks from the Atlas Powder Company. But the official mine records show only 50 sticks used for routine operations. Where did the extra 100 sticks go?" He set a ledger on the table. "The numbers do not lie even when men do." Father Brennan spoke last, his voice gentle but firm. "These men came to me after your confrontation with Harrison in the street. They wanted to make confessions to unburden their consciences. I told them confession was between them and God, but justice was a matter for the law and for the community. That is why we are here, to ask what you plan to do next." Caleb looked at each man in turn. These were not heroes from stories. They were ordinary men, flawed and afraid, who had chosen to overcome their fear. That made them braver than any knight in armor. "I am going to marry Ellie," he said, "if she will have me. Not because of some story we made up, but because she deserves someone who will stand beside her. Someone who will not run when things get hard. And because I am tired of being alone." "That will not stop Harrison," Robert Carter pointed out. "Even if you marry her, he will fight it. He has that contract." "Then we break the contract," Caleb said. "Prove it was made under duress, that Ellie's stepfather did not have the right to sell her like livestock." "Can that be done, Father?" Father Brennan considered. "Contracts made for immoral purposes are void in the eyes of the church and increasingly in the eyes of the law. If we can show that Harrison's intent was to essentially purchase a human being and that Ellie was coerced into this arrangement through her family's desperation, then yes, it could be challenged. We would need a public hearing," Jacob Moore said. "Get it all out in the open. Make Harrison defend his actions in front of the town. Marshal Grant would have to preside," Dr. R. Wade added, "and he has been on Blackwell payroll for 20 years. Marshal Grant cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. "I have a daughter," the marshal said. 16 years old, smart as a whip, dreams of going to college, becoming a teacher. When I look at her, I think about the world I am leaving behind. What kind of world is it where girls can be sold like cattle to settle debts? He met Caleb's eyes. I have looked the other way for too long, kept the peace by keeping quiet. But there is no peace in silence. There is just more suffering. So yes, I will preside over a public hearing, and I will let the evidence speak. Dr. Werwade pulled one more paper from his folder. There is something else you all should know. Luther Blackwell is dying. Liver disease. I have been treating him. He has maybe 6 months left. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Which means Harrison is desperate, Sam said. A dying man's son trying to prove he is worthy before his father passes. That makes him more dangerous, not less. Then we move fast, Father Brennan said. 1 week. Ellie will make her decision in 1 week. We present our evidence, then in front of the whole community, force the truth into the light. They talked for another hour, forming their plan, coordinating their testimonies, building their case brick by brick. When they finally left riding to back down the mountain in darkness, Caleb stood on his porch and felt something he had not felt in 3 years. Hope. The 4th day found Caleb in town again, this time with purpose. Father Brennan had arranged a brief meeting with Ellie in the church courtyard, properly chaperoned, to discuss the coming hearing. She looked different after 4 days in the convent. Thinner, perhaps, the strain showing in her face. But her eyes were bright, alert, fierce. I have been praying, she told him quietly. Not to decide whether to leave, but to understand why I was so afraid to live. And what did you understand? That fear kept me safe, but it also kept me from everything worth having. Before they could say more, Sister Beatrice gently indicated their time was up. As Caleb was leaving the church grounds, he saw a commotion building in the main street. A crowd was gathering in front of the mining company office. At the center of it, he could see a tall figure in an expensive suit, Harrison Blackwell. Even from this distance, Caleb recognized him. Tall like his father had been, but softer, well-fed on other people's labor. Dark hair slicked back with pomade, clean-shaven, manicured. Everything about him spoke of money and power, and he was angry. Even from here, Caleb could see it in the set of his shoulders, the aggressive jut of his jaw. Sam appeared at Caleb's elbow. Looks like word reached him. You want to avoid this? We can go around. Every instinct Caleb had screamed at him to do exactly that, to avoid confrontation, to slip away before Harrison saw him. It was what he had been doing for 3 years. But something had changed. Maybe it was Ellie's courage in standing beside him at the convent. Maybe it was finally learning the truth about his father. Maybe it was just being tired of running. No, Caleb said. I am done avoiding Blackwells. He walked toward the crowd. Sam followed. Harrison saw them coming. His head snapped up, eyes locking onto Caleb with laser focus. The crowd around him quieted, sensing drama. Ashford Harrison called out, You have some nerve showing your face in this town. Caleb brought his mare to a stop 20 feet from Harrison, close enough to talk, far enough to react if things turned violent. Last I checked, this was still a free country. I can ride where I please. Can you? Harrison took 3 steps forward. Can you also steal nuns from convents? Is that on your list of rights? I did not steal anyone. I saved a woman's life. You ruined her. Harrison's voice rose and Caleb could smell the whiskey on his breath. It was barely past noon. Sister Magdalene was pure, innocent, protected. And you defiled her with your presence, your touch, your... He seemed to choke on the words. Caleb kept his voice level, refusing to be baited. I kept her from freezing to death in a creek. If that is defilement, then I am guilty. You are guilty of more than that. Harrison came closer, close enough that Caleb could see the bloodshot eyes, the tremor in his hands. Eleanor Fletcher belongs to me. Her stepfather signed a contract. I have legal claim. She is not property. In the eyes of the law, she is. Her stepfather owed my family $800. The contract states clearly that Eleanor Fletcher would be given in marriage to settle the debt. It is binding, it is legal, and it is mine. Around them, the crowd had swelled, miners finishing their shift, shopkeepers stepping out of stores, women with shopping baskets. Everyone wanting to see the confrontation between the Blackwell heir and the hermit who had supposedly stolen a nun. Show me the contract, Caleb said. Harrison smiled, and there was nothing pleasant in it. Do not have it on me, but I can produce it any time. Signed and witnessed. Your little romance does not change that. Eleanor's debt to my family predates whatever sob story you two concocted. Then take it to a judge. Let the law decide. Oh, I will. But first, Harrison raised his voice, playing to the crowd. First, I want everyone in this town to know what you are. This man, Caleb Ashford, is the son of a thief and arsonist. His father burned down my father's warehouse. His mother went mad from the shame. And now he is trying to steal a woman promised to me. The Ashfords are a poison in this community. Always have been. Something snapped inside Caleb. For 3 years, he had absorbed the town's judgment in silence. He had let them believe the worst because fighting it seemed pointless. But now, with Ellie's future on the line, with the truth about his father finally spoken aloud, silence felt like cowardice. My father was innocent, Caleb's voice rang clear across the street. The fire was caused by faulty wiring that your father refused to fix. My father was blamed because he had been asking questions about safety violations, questions your family did not want answered. Harrison's face flushed dark red. You are calling my father a liar. I am calling him a murderer. Caleb swung down from his horse. Just like he murdered Thomas Fletcher and 6 other men by deliberately collapsing that mine tunnel 11 years ago. The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a basket. Apples rolled into the street, forgotten. Harrison's hand moved toward his jacket. Caleb saw the bulge there, recognized the shape of a pistol. But before Harrison could draw, Marshal Grant pushed through the crowd. That is enough, the marshal barked. Both of you back down. Blackwell, keep your hand away from that gun. Ashford, get back on your horse. Marshal, this man is making slanderous accusations against my family. Harrison sputtered. Then sue him for slander. Do not shoot him in the street. Grant's hand rested on his own revolver. Now both of you disperse before I throw you both in jail for disturbing the peace. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Harrison, with visible effort, stepped back. This is not over, Ashford. Not by a long shot. My father will hear about this. He will be interested to know, Caleb said quietly, that everyone now knows about the skull fracture, about the dynamite, about the 7 murders he committed to silence witnesses. Harrison stared at him, and in that moment, Caleb saw something flicker in the other man's eyes. Not just rage, fear. Cross the Blackwells, and you end up buried, Harrison said finally. Enjoy your wedding, Ashford. I will enjoy your funeral. He turned and stalked away, his hired men following like confused ducklings. Caleb stood in the street, heart pounding, aware that he had just crossed a line from which there was no return. But as he looked around at the crowd, at the faces watching him, he saw something he had not expected. Not all of them looked hostile. Some looked thoughtful. Some looked angry, but not at him. At the Blackwells. Seeds had been planted. Whether they would grow remained to be seen. That evening, as Caleb was preparing to ride back up the mountain, a woman approached Sam's cabin. She moved hesitantly, looking over her shoulder as if afraid of being followed. Sam opened the door. The woman stood in the fading light, thin and worn, with copper-red hair threaded with gray. Her face bore the marks of years of hardship, but her eyes, those green eyes, were unmistakable. Moira Fletcher, Ellie's mother. Mrs. Fletcher, Sam said gently, please come in. She entered like a frightened bird, clutching a leather satchel to her chest. When she saw Caleb, she stopped. You are him, the man who saved my daughter. Yes, ma'am. I heard what Harrison Blackwell is trying to do. I heard about the contract. Her voice broke. I let Vincent sell her once. I was too weak, too scared to stop him. I have lived with that shame for 11 years. But I will not let her suffer for my cowardice anymore. She set the satchel on the table, opened it with trembling hands, and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Thomas gave me this the night before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe. Use it if I needed to protect Eleanor. She opened the journal, page after page of neat handwriting. Numbers, dates, names. It is all here. Every safety violation at the Blackwell mines. 47 of them across 6 operations. The names of the inspectors Luther bribed. The dates of the bribes, the amounts. Everything Thomas was going to testify about. She turned to the last page. The handwriting here was different, hurried, scrawled. Caleb read aloud. If you are reading this, something has happened to me. Protect Eleanor. Do not let them have her. The truth is in these pages. Use it. It was signed Thomas Fletcher, September 12, 1883, 2 weeks before the collapse. Mrs. Fletcher, Caleb said gently. Why did you not use this before? This could have brought down the Blackwells years ago. I was afraid, she whispered. Vincent beat me when he was drunk. Luther Blackwell controlled everything. I had no job, no money, nowhere to go. I told myself I was protecting Eleanor by staying silent, by letting her hide in the convent. But I was really just protecting myself. Tears ran down her weathered face. I heard what you did, how you jumped into that creek without thinking, how you gave her your coat, your warmth, your protection, how you are willing to fight the Blackwells even though it might kill you. She looked at him with those green eyes so like her daughter's. You are braver than I ever was. But maybe I can find some courage now. Maybe I can finally finish what Thomas started. She pushed the journal toward Caleb. Give this to Marshal Grant. Let it speak for my husband. Let it protect my daughter. Chapter 9, The Hearing. One day came with autumn sunlight breaking through morning mist. The church was packed with every soul in Blackwell Hollow. 300 people crammed into pews built for 200, standing along the walls spilling out into the courtyard. This was theater drama, the most interesting thing to happen in years. Ellie sat in the front row wearing not her nun's habit, but a simple dress of deep blue that Sister Beatrice had found for her. Her copper hair, grown out slightly in the week's passage, caught the light filtering through the stained glass windows. Mother Superior sat rigid beside her. On Ellie's other side, Sister Beatrice offered a small, encouraging smile. Across the aisle, Harrison Blackwell sat flanked by 6 men hired muscle who had not come to worship. Caleb sat in the second row directly behind Ellie, close enough to offer support, far enough to respect propriety. Father Brennan moved to the altar. We are gathered this morning for a special purpose. Sister Magdalene Fletcher has completed her week of discernment. She must now declare her intention. He looked at Ellie with kindness. My child, what is your decision? Ellie stood. She turned slowly and, for the first time since entering the church, she let her eyes meet Caleb's. In them, he saw determination, hope, in something that might have been love or might become it given time. I choose to leave the convent. Her voice carried to every corner of the sanctuary. I choose to return to the world. I choose. She looked directly at Caleb. I choose him. The church erupted in whispers. Harrison Blackwell shot to his feet. Stop. This ceremony cannot proceed. Father Brennan remained perfectly still. Mr. Blackwell, what is the meaning of this interruption? Harrison strode into the center aisle, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. Eleanor Fletcher is bound to me by law. This document proves it. He thrust the paper toward Father Brennan. She has no freedom to choose. She is mine. The priest took the document, unfolded it, deliberately read. The sanctuary held its breath. This is a debt settlement agreement, Father Brennan said finally, signed by Vincent Drake, identifying himself as Eleanor's stepfather. It promises her in marriage to you in exchange for forgiveness of $800. He looked at Ellie. Child, did you consent to this arrangement? No, Father, I was 16. I fled to the convent to escape it. Her consent is irrelevant under territorial law, Harrison snapped. Her legal guardian at the time had the right to make such arrangements. The contract is valid, perhaps by the letter of the law, Father Brennan said. But we are not in a courtroom, Mr. Blackwell. We are in a house of God. And in God's house, we ask not what is legal, but what is moral. He held up the contract. Is it moral to sell a young girl to settle debts? Is it moral to treat a human being as property? That is not the question before us, Harrison said. The question is whether this woman can break a legally binding contract just because she has developed romantic notions about a mountain hermit. I have a question, Caleb said, standing. Every eye in the church swung to him. Why do you want her so badly? Harrison, there are plenty of women in this territory. Why Ellie specifically? Because she is mine. The contract says so. No. Caleb took a step forward. That is not it. You want her because she is Thomas Fletcher's daughter. Because Thomas knew things about your father's business. Knew about the safety violations, the corner cutting the men who died because of Blackwell negligence. Those are slanderous lies, Harrison shouted. Are they? Then explain this. Dr. Wade stood holding up his folder. I have evidence that Thomas Fletcher was murdered before the mine collapsed. Medical evidence I have kept hidden for 11 years because I was afraid. I am not afraid anymore. Robert Carter rose. I have testimony about the explosions, about how that collapse was deliberate. Jacob Moore stood. I have financial records showing purchases of blasting powder that was never accounted for. And then, from the back of the church, a woman's voice rang out clear and strong despite years of being silenced. And I have Thomas Fletcher's journal. Every violation, every bribe, every lie the Blackwells told to keep themselves rich and powerful, while good men died in their minds. Moira Fletcher walks down the center aisle head high, carrying the leather journal like a sacred text. She stopped in front of Harrison Blackwell. You killed my husband. Your father killed 7 good men. And you think you can take my daughter too? She turned to Marshall Grant. This is for you, Marshall. This is the truth Thomas died trying to tell. Grant took the journal, opened it, began to read. His face went pale, then red, then settled into grim determination. An investigation will be opened, he said, into the 1883 mine collapse in the death of Thomas Fletcher. Until it is complete, all contracts involving the Fletcher family are suspended pending review. You cannot do that. Harrison's composure was cracking. You work for my father. I work for the law, Grant said. You got a problem with it. Take it up with the territorial court. But for now, Miss Fletcher is free of any obligation to you. Harrison's face went purple with fury. This is not over. My father will hear about this. You will all regret crossing the Blackwells. Your father, Dr. Wade, said quietly died 3 hours ago. Heart attack. I was with him at the end. The church went absolutely silent. Harrison staggered as if struck. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Your father is gone, Dr. Wade continued. And now you have a choice he never gave you. You can keep following his path of cruelty and corruption, or you can be a different kind of man. Harrison looked around the church, seeing not support, but condemnation, pity, and in some faces hope that he might choose differently. He turned and fled, his hired men scrambling to follow. Father Brennan cleared his throat. Well, that was eventful. Now I believe we had a different ceremony to discuss. Caleb Ashford, do you still wish to marry this woman? Caleb's eyes found Ellie's. I do, Father. If she will have me. She walked toward him, each step deliberate. When she reached him, she took his hands. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you. The church erupted in applause. Father Brennan beamed. Then by the authority vested in me, I will perform the ceremony. Not today, as we need time to prepare properly, but soon. Perhaps next Sunday. Next Sunday, Caleb agreed. 1 week to let the dust settle. 1 week for Harrison to make whatever move he was planning. Because Caleb had no illusions. The Blackwells did not surrender easily. 3 days later, everything went wrong. Caleb woke before dawn to pounding on Sam's door. He grabbed his knife, moved to the window. Marshall Grant stood outside, his face grim in the pre-dawn darkness. Caleb opened the door. What happened in the convent? There was a fire last night. Small one contained to the kitchen. But in the confusion. Grant paused, and in that pause, Caleb's world tilted. Ellie is gone. Disappeared. Sister Beatrice says she went to bed as normal. This morning her cell was empty. Window was open. No sign of forced entry, but also no sign she left willingly. Caleb was moving before Grant finished speaking, pulling on his boots, grabbing his coat. Harrison, he said flatly, that is my thinking too. But I cannot prove it. His men say he was home all night, without evidence. I do not need evidence. I need to find her. Son, if you go off half-cocked, you will end up in jail or dead. Let me investigate properly. How long will that take? A day? 2 days a week. Caleb strapped on his knife belt, checked his father's revolver. She could be dead by then. Sam emerged from his bedroom already dressed. I am coming with you. By the time the sun rose, they had a search party of 12 men. The miners who had testified at the church. Dr. Wade. Jacob Moore. Even Marshall Grant, operating unofficially since he had no jurisdiction outside town limits. Father Brennan met them at the church, his face haggard. I should have insisted she stay somewhere else. I should have known Harrison would try something. This is not your fault, Father Caleb said. It is mine. I should have taken her up the mountain where I could protect her. Or maybe it is all of ours, Robert Carter said. We pushed too hard, too fast. Backed Harrison into a corner. Cornered animals are dangerous. Then we better find her before he proves just how dangerous. They searched for hours. Harrison's mansion locked tight. The mining company offices empty. The warehouses deserted. By midday, desperation clawed at Caleb's throat. "We are missing something," he said, staring at the crude map Sam had sketched. "Blackwell Hollow is not that big. There are not that many places to hide someone. Unless he took her out of town entirely," DeWade suggested. No, the certainty came from deep in Caleb's gut. He would not run. He wants us to know he won. He wants to make a point. Robert Carter crouched beside the map, his coal-stained finger tracing lines. Making a point. His finger stopped. Jesus, the old mines. Marshall Grant shook his head. Those have been sealed 4 years. Most are too unstable to even enter. Most, Carter said, looking up. But mine number 7, the one that collapsed in '83. The seal was always partial. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Thomas Fletcher had died in mine number 7. Harrison was obsessed with justice, with proving the Blackwells always won. That is where she is, Caleb said. That is where he would take her. He was already moving toward his horse. Son, wait. Marshall Grant grabbed his arm. If you are wrong, we waste hours. I am not wrong. Caleb met his eyes. I know it the same way I knew she was in the creek that first day. I can feel it. Then let us stop talking and start riding, Sam said, already mounting his horse. The old Blackwell mine number 7 sat 3 miles outside town, up a narrow valley that had been stripped of trees during the boom days. Now saplings were reclaiming the land, but the mine entrance remained. A dark mouth in the hillside boarded over with weathered planks warning of danger. Those planks had been removed recently, fresh marks in the wood, nails pulled out cleanly. Someone had been here. Caleb dismounted, approached the entrance cautiously. The darkness inside was absolute, the smell of old earth and rot drifting out like breath from a tomb. Ellie, he called into the darkness. His voice echoed, swallowed by the mountain. Ellie, are you in there? Nothing, just the whisper of wind through the valley and the nervous stamping of horses. Then faintly from deep within the mine a voice. Caleb, alive, terrified, but alive. Caleb did not think. He plunged into the darkness. And behind him, 11 men followed, descending into the earth to face whatever waited in the deep. The stars had come out over the mountains, scattered like diamonds across black velvet. Thomas sat very still, hardly breathing, waiting for his grandfather to continue. The boy's face was pale in the starlight, his eyes wide with fear and anticipation. Grandpa Thomas whispered, "What happened in the mine? Did you find her?" Caleb looked at his grandson, at those green eyes so like Eleanor's, and felt the weight of memory pressing against his chest like a physical thing. "We found her, Thomas. But what happened in that mine, what I saw there, what I learned about the nature of evil and redemption, that changed me forever. Because sometimes the monsters we fight are not monsters at all. Sometimes they are just broken men doing broken things." He paused, gathering himself. "Let me tell you about the darkness, boy. Let me tell you what we found in the deep places of the earth." Chapter 11. Into the deep. The main tunnel ran straight for 100 yards before branching. Caleb moved through the darkness with Sam's lantern casting wild shadows on the walls. Water dripped from the ceiling, pooling on the uneven floor. The support timbers were rotten, sagging under tons of rock and soil. Every footstep raised small cascades of dirt from above. "This whole thing could come down," Robert Carter whispered. As a miner, he knew the signs of instability. "We need to be quick." Behind them, the other men followed in single file. Marshall Grant, Dr. Wade, Jacob Moore, Father Brennan, 5 other miners who had volunteered. 12 men descending into the earth like some ancient myth, like warriors entering the underworld. Ellie Caleb called out every few yards. "Where are you?" Her voice came back faint and echoing. "Straight ahead. Keep coming." They followed her voice deeper into the mountain. The air grew stale thick with the smell of old earth and something else. Something chemical. Dynamite, perhaps, or the ghost of explosives used 11 years ago to murder 7 good men. The tunnel branched again, then again. A maze carved into the mountain's heart. But Ellie's voice guided them, growing stronger as they approached. Finally, they reached a section that had been partially collapsed and then crudely reopened. Someone had dug through the rubble, shored up the passage with fresh timbers that looked disturbingly temporary. Beyond it, in a small chamber lit by a single oil lamp, they found her. Ellie sat tied to an old mining's heart, the iron wheels rusted but still solid. Her dress was torn, dark stains on the fabric that could have been dirt or blood or both. Her face was streaked with grime, her copper hair matted against her skull.